Alex here again. Time for another question and answer. Thank you for everybody for your well wishes. This is a little explanation, if you haven't been following, why I've been absent for the last couple weeks. I had to give myself some time off, and this is going to play into the what's coming up videos and what I've been doing the last couple weeks videos. I had an injury. I tore some things in my leg, and while they were in there, they discovered some other problems that were causing me a lot of pain and lack of mobility. So I had to go to numerous doctor visits and hospitals, ultrasound and MRI and X-ray and injections and all kinds of stuff. So that's been going on in the last few weeks. Plus, it overlaps with holidays here in America. So as a result, I was like, these couple weeks are just wasted. I'm going to not be able to be productive in big chunks of time that you need for doing detailed methodical experiments. So not wanting to waste all that time, and with me being super bummed out by not being able to work, which I like to do and go crazy if I'm not doing something, I was like, I'm just going to do something fun. Just do something that's fun to me and run a camera, and then I'll take the hours of footage and go back and edit it into something else. So I do have some videos coming out probably after the weekend, a video series coming out that's not related to any of this stuff. It's just a fun thing that I wanted to do. Has to do with music gear and history and conspiracy theories and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a good time, but I understand if you don't want to watch it or just want to skim through. That's fine. Most of it is already done. The beginning parts, it's what I was doing in my downtime, when I couldn't hobble around to places. So that's going to be coming up. Sorry to disappoint the people that are waiting with bated breath for the videos that I've been promising are coming up. Those are coming up. I just needed a sanity break. So I took a vacation from regular work to do different work. But along those lines, the Ender 3 has arrived. It's still in the box, and that's going to be a live stream thing. So that's going to chill right there. And I was reading the comments for the last video put up where I asked for some feedback on upcoming projects, and everybody wants to see the TMC 5160 review. And I want to get that finished. And I explained in the comments and maybe in that video that I was having problems with Marlin's homing routine with those for some reason. It just doesn't work. The chips work fine when I jog them around and do all the tests in Pronterface, but I can't get them to auto home. So that may be some issue with, I have no idea what it is, so I haven't had time to diagnose it. So everything is sitting there as it was 2 weeks ago when I was running that test, and I'll have to get back to that. Stupid me, I was thinking if I just pulled the board that already had the firmware for that printer and then just changed the options in Marlin to TMC 5160s, that it would work perfectly. No. So anyway, that's coming up. Like I said, and I want to take that while I'm doing the Ender things and do I'm doing I don't know, Pimp Your Ender series, Ender Mod series, in-depth examination series, since it's such a popular printer, and that'll give me the opportunity to go through some technical details of budget printers and upgrades and that type of thing on something that people have a reference for. That was kind of the point of the design series with the first live stream printer, which I need to roll those videos out as well, but that printer is being monopolized right now by the 5160 board that I'm testing and the Ramps 1.6 Plus board that I'm testing as well. So I can't do those videos at the moment. Everything's kind of contingent on everything else, and the thing that's holding it up is the homing routine in Marlin. So regardless, those are probably going to be rolled into an Ender thing. So I might do a shorter hey, here's a 5160, hey, here's a, Ramps 1.6 Plus, and then say, hey, here's putting that in an Ender and setting it up. I think that would be interesting, maybe. I just hate the canned, standard review, here's the features and benefits, here's the price point, and that type of thing. So I want to make it a little bit more interesting, but like I said, I've had a lot of downtime these last 2 weeks, and that's something in the future that I'll get to after I figure out the Marlin thing. Or maybe I'll just can that for now get back to doing the live stream like detail videos talking about like the design process and all that stuff, and then when I get those out, do the Ender 3 build live stream, and then do the Ender 3 series with the 5160s and all that. The only thing that bums me out about that is because like I want to do the 5160 test as much as people want to see them. So anyhow, let's get on to the questions. And I'm probably going to have to break the filming of this up into a couple different segments because I have terrible springtime allergies right now. My eyes are all beet red and you can hear my voice is really scratchy, so I may have to take a break and come back to it. So sorry if it's a little choppy. And as you know, I say at the end of the videos, like I try to get down to the comments and respond to them as best I can. But I can't get to all of them. I can't get to all of them in the depth that I would like to. So some of them I spin off and I just wait for the next Q&A and then plunk them in there. So in this segment, if you've never seen one of these before, I go through the YouTube comments and find questions that I think need to be expounded upon, or I think would be useful to the broader community that they may have missed if they didn't read through the comments, because I mean a lot of people don't. And I don't blame you, there tend to be a lot of boneheads down there, but I try to keep things civil on this channel, and the community can police itself. I'm from the old school where all this stuff was on like bulletin boards and email lists and things like that. And I'm a free information, open source type of guy. So I tend to just like let things play out, and as long as nobody's abusive to anybody else or, you know, says anything that's, you know, not rated PG-13, then, you know, I'll just let it slide. But other than that, I just kind of like let it go. And I never delete comments where somebody's, you know, disagreeing with something I said or bringing up something that I missed, because those tend to be the most valuable ones for the videos. Oh, you probably also noticed there was no intro here. That's because I tried to do a funny thing in response to the people that were like, "Brr, death metal noise intro," and put entry of the Gladiators underneath the thing there, that thing. But then I found out, even though that's public domain, Universal Music Group is copyright striking people who are using it in videos, which is a load of bullcrap. But I had to cut that out, so sorry about that. Oh, by the way, if you're not into the intro music, I understand. I understand that. That's fine. Everybody has different taste in music. But the way that I have things set up is, here's your keyboard, right? These magical little arrow keys down here. If you push the one to the right once, you skip the intro. The intro is 6.5 seconds long. This is a 5-second skip, and there's a fade at the beginning of the end. So as soon as that starts, just go boink and you skip the intro. Go boink again and you skip the placard and get right to my stupid face talking. Doc Dawning says, oh, this is under the part 3 of the 32-bit 3D printing series where I started talking about some of the boards that were available. He said, whoops, let me expand this. Epic video, thank you very much. I chirped out a little profanity when rambling about each board ended right before Smoothie board, which I was rather keen to hear commentary on. I mainly wanted to see if the main points align with what I already think. And then he asked some questions about 24 versus 12 volts operation. In my opinion, 12 volt always bad, but you can make it work within reason for certain type of printers. That's just the way that things are in robotics. When you say like, can this work? Especially if you're talking to like, you know, a tinker or an engineer or somebody like that, you're like, can this work? And you're like, well, yeah, it can. Sure, it can. I can install a full-size refrigerator in the bed of my truck, but, you know, is it practical? That's all to say that, like, you know, you can get 12 volts to work. 24 works better, 36 better, etc., as far as the stepper motors are concerned. But better may mean that the performance advantage is out of the operating conditions. Stop hammering! Out of the operating conditions that you would normally be running for a 3D printer, so it may not be better for you. So anyway, that I bothered saying that because this ties into the question. This guy wanted to know about smoothie boards. In that original video, and you've probably noticed, like, this channel's more about like taking cheap parts from Asia, popsicle sticks and chewing gum, and getting everything to work properly, and warning you which ones will, like, you know, fail catastrophically and what you can do as a workaround and things like that. Because it's like reviewing, you know, a high-end cell phone or something like that. You get into like talking about luxury features, and you have everybody like thinking like a notch is on the screen is like the end of the world, and I'm like, oh, clickbait you right up the butt. Anyhow, same thing when you get to like high-end boards. You're like, oh, well, you expect these to work well. You expect them to be well supported by the manufacturer. You expect to have a forum where you can directly address users and the creators of the board and get your questions answered. And if anything breaks, you send it back and they send you a new one, like that type of thing. What fun is that for me to review? They also have a closed ecosystem where like you have to pay another $85 to get their, you know, special panel and things like that. And you're like, okay, well, if you have the money to give these guys that, just give them the money because, you know, keep the community going. But it's not really the kind of stuff that I cover, especially in the like 3D printing stuff when you have like, you know, Joel and Tom and all these other people that are covering the fancy stuff. But none of those guys are going in and telling you like what interrupts you have to set as hardware to get your freaking end stops working on like, you know, a ramps board that has a, you know, a STM32 project board like glued to the bottom of it or something like that. That's where I come in. So anyway, I kind of responded underneath saying that same thing. Like I didn't cover closed ecosystem boards like or a closed source board, so you have like Duet and Smoothie and like the Lurge stuff and, you know, some other things like that, because it didn't really apply to the, you know, the sort of budget feel of the entire series. I did warn him though that Smoothie is all based on the NXP LPC series microcontrollers. Those are different than the controllers used in all the other stuff. Like STM32 inherits from the STM32 Arduino project, so that's like Arduino based. The SAMD stuff is Arduino based. What's the other one? I'm drawing a blank right now. But anyway, a lot of those draw from like kind of the same, you know, libraries and the same support base of users and things like that. Whereas the LPCs from NXP, that is all like embed platform, which is not nearly as widely accepted, not nearly as widely documented, not nearly as widely community supported and things like that. Not to say there's anything wrong with it, but it's just a different thing. So you can't just take something that works on one and plunk it into the other as easily. You have to write that into the HAL, and then you have to actually get into the actual libraries of the code and things like that and see what's possible and what's not. They've worked out some issues on the other chip series in firmwares like Marlin quicker than they have on the LPC, and they're still dealing with some stuff. I think it has to do with the way that it does flash caching or something like that. It's throwing off some of the calculations when you use more than one of the advanced features at the time, so it has to do with the planner in the firmware, and it's been like that for a year and a half. They're perfectly usable. Like I use a rearm board every day for printer that uses an LPC processor, but things like S-Base, rearm, Smoothie board, things like that, they all kind of derive from that same ecosystem, and they all flow from the original Smoothie open source project. So, you know, you just have to expect that. Plus, they have things like end stops being on non-interruptible, what do you call them, banks on the processor, so you can't turn off the end stop polling and use hardware interrupts, etc., etc., etc. It's just, like I said, it's a different thing. Greetings from the Netherlands. I'm from the Netherlands too. Yeah, a lot of Dutch. I don't know what's going on. There's a lot of Dutch folks that watch my channel. And that's fine. I don't know if you've ever been to the Netherlands, but it's really nice. Back in my former life as a full-time professional guitarer, we did a tour over there and played a couple shows in the Netherlands, and it was fantastic. We had this running joke that up there in those, you know, the Northern European countries, Netherlands and like, you know, Denmark, they had these big like round tower things all over the place. I don't know what they are, but we would joke that they took all of those towers and they used them to spot the ugly people and like kind of shuffle them off somewhere else, because everyone in like the Netherlands and Denmark looked like models out of a magazine. Disclaimer: we at the Alex Kennis channel do not make judgments against ugly people, nor are we in the business of reinforcing standards of physical beauty. It is, after all, in the eye of the beholder, and if you flame me in the comments for this, it will only make me laugh. We now return you to your regularly scheduled programming. But we played at Tivoli, is that a place in Utrecht? Yeah, Tivoli and Utrecht, I think. Anyway, great show, great venue. And man, you guys, you love your prog metal over there, which is near and dear to my heart. Like a lot of the female-fronted prog rock metal stuff, like Epica, Within Temptation, things like that. The Gathering, like Pestilence back in the day, like if you're into that, like atheist, Pestilence believer, like progressive thrash type stuff, like they're from the Netherlands. Who else? Oh, freaking Arion! They got Eric Clayton, James LaBrie, Russell Allen, Bruce Dickinson, and Devin Townsend all together on albums to like sing medleys with each other. It was amazing. And what's that like progressive gent band? Oh, Textures. Yeah, freaking Textures. They're great. And Van Halen. Sorry about the potato quality here. It was the first one I found with reusage rights. So anyway, yeah. Hi, Netherlands folks. I grew up watching Dutch Football Weekly every Sunday. Did it go out on Sunday? So like my soccer heroes growing up were like Reggie Blinka and guys like that, who I don't know what he's doing now. He's probably like 60 years old and coaching or something. But yeah, if you happen to see like Van Persie or Ian Robin walking around, tell them America loves them and Alex said hi. Anyway, enough of Dutch stuff. Let me see what else. Oh, VD asks, Alex, do you encounter VFA on your printer as well? That's referring to like vertical banding that happens in prints, and like Prusa users are discovering that with their trinamic drivers. That type of like cyclical thing has to do with like the planner in the firmware as well as the settings of your microcontroller as it relates to the way that your driver and your motor relate to each other and the kinematics of the machine. So I've mentioned with my printers, I use a 2-to-1 like block and pulley step down ratio. So essentially I can take a 1.8 degree stepper, stick it on my machines, and it's automatically a 0.9 degree stepper, or I could take a 0.9 degree stepper, stick it on my machine, and it's a 0.45 degree stepper. Like it just gets finer and finer at the expense of, you know, having to run at a higher RPM. So their fix was to use like OMC motors and to tweak the firmware a little bit and to run 0.9 degree steppers. Since I'm already using a finer stepper resolution and I'm already using OMC motors, I haven't had those problems, but that doesn't mean they couldn't pop up at particular settings, and you might have to make some tweaks in the firmware because of it. I don't think that's something that is going to show up in like Marlin as a tweakable feature, just because there's so freaking many motors out there. Whereas somebody like Prusa, they can easily go in and either change the motors that they use for somebody else or yell at LDO and, you know, tell them their motors are crap, which they're not. They're good motors. They just have this particular artifact. Or, you know, compensate in the firmware or the planner or something like that to smooth that out. But if those artifacts do show up in any of my printing, I'll let you know. Like I said, I love to publicize my failures as well as successes. Merc Captain says, I bought a NEMA 17 that has an integrated lead screw. That's better, right? Yeah, just refer to the previous comments on axial loads and things like that. Better, it really depends on use case, how heavy your gantry is and things like that. For like a lightweight gantry and a Bowden extruder, then I'd say you're probably fine with any of those, especially if you have dual lead screws. But you know, when you're getting into heavier stuff or heavier duty stuff, then it's going to start eating into the lifespan of your stepper. Let me see here. Oh yeah, Werner Bowden had another question. He said he often used thinner to clean things, but what about gasoline as well, or petrol, as you folks over on the other side of the pond call it? And then he asked about, he called 10 to 20% oil for mopeds. Over here, we call it like 2-cycle oil or 2-stroke oil or something like that. And it's like a, 50-to-1 ratio of oil to gasoline. So his thinking was use that as a solvent to clean off the old stuff, and then it leaves a residue of gasoline on there. That'd probably be great for cleaning something up and skipping out a step, if you're just going to like clean it, wrap it, and store it, you know, that might be fine. As far as like having that as lubrication, there's not really enough on there, but like for the rails, you know, probably. Let me see. More people talking about axial load on steppers. Watch my previous videos. So let's start off with some heavy stuff here. This is yet more clarification on the ball bearing trick video with respect to like axial loads on the steppers, design philosophy, and whatnot. This response is a little bit drawn out, but I wanted to take everyone on a journey, so feel free to skip it in a time index if you're not interested. Let's talk about like community and clickbaitiness and posters and comments and things like that. I try, if you've noticed, I try to avoid like the popular flavor of the week, clickbaity stuff that'll just bring in the plebs. Sorry to use that term, but I don't want to build a community of like the rabble. I want people who are on this journey, and this channel is not like a manufacturer or like educator or designer or something like that, you know, dictating what the best standards and practices are. This is an experimenter's channel where I'm walking through this with you and then respond, and we have a discourse back and forth in the comments in these videos and that type of thing. Everything in the world where you say like, does this work, does this not work, it depends on the conditions around it. When I was first learning my electronic stuff, I would just like hunt down people online who were jumping onto these like bulletin boards and like trying to be helpful and things like that, who were the original designers of some of the things that we were talking about. And this goes all the way back to these guys were doing this. I mean, there's some white-haired dudes that were doing this way back, you know, between the wars. But I was seriously into vacuum tubes, and I was working with analog electronics a whole lot. Some of the guys that like originally designed the first op amps for Texas Instruments, like they were on these boards. The guys that wrote some of the technical data sheets for like RCA and GE and things like that. A few dudes who worked at Bell Labs, some guys who worked for NASA, some guys that worked for Lockheed. The guys who took these original components, plotted out the characteristic curves on the data sheets with a pencil and a French curve, they were on these boards talking about these things. So that was convenient because you run into these situations with posters where they'll read like a little nugget of information, or they read it in like a textbook, or it's just something that they were taught, and then think that's universally applicable across every situation and go and spew it in the comments just to stamp their authority on either the original poster or other people in in the thread. And this applies to YouTube comments as well. That's why I'm looping this in. What I learned working with those people on the forums was that there are standards and designs, best practices, and then there's what's applicable and where. One of the guys, if you're into like all the audio forums and things like that, one of the guys who has been incredibly helpful over the years to me and hundreds of other people is a dude named Paul Reed. And he has this uncanny ability, in a somewhat curmudgeonly sort of way sometimes, to take questions that are very technical and break them down into very simple answers for people. And some of the most important things is somebody would say, oh, well, on the data sheet it says like this, and that, or why did they design it this way when the data sheet specifically says that, or why is this amplifier or whatever so popular even though it flies in the face of best practices, that sort of thing. So if you'd ask a question like, my preamp is clipping, help, he would say something like, who or what is clipping? It's situational. It's not necessarily a circuit. What are you feeding into it? What's going out of it? That sort of thing. Because in a vacuum, it's useless. So that applies to things like the discussion that broke out with people on the ball bearing trick thing about best practices and standards and practices with respect to axial load on stepper motors, and I'm probably going to have to spin that out into an entire other video, but this is just like a general blanket statement to cover all of those questions there, like, is it best standards and practices to have axial loads on steppers that are not rated for it? No, obviously not. If you look in the data sheets of a lot of those steppers, they will tell you the axial load. But if you also look, a lot of times they just generically will put some kind of value in there. How much axial load you put on something, and I'll spin this off maybe into another more complex video, relates to the expected life of the bearings, the expected shelf life and use life of the motor, as in, is it going to take 5 years or is it going to take 7 years to wear out this $8 motor that literally costs half the price of a spool of filament? And then what mechanisms they use to put it together. For example, they do have a wave washer underneath, usually, that applies preload to the sides of the bearings that prevents lateral play. Obviously, if you turn a stepper like this and you're putting pressure down on the wave washer, you're going to get deflection. Now, does that deflection affect the operation of the motor or not? Does it affect the longevity of the motor or not? Is it best practices? No, it isn't. In a regular use case, is that a problem? Well, again, who or what is clipping? What's the situation? It's something that requires testing, not debate. So just as a thought experiment, let's look at both sides of the equation real quick. If you just take the sample size of, virtually every desktop 3D printer, there does not seem to be a rash or even an inkling from what I could find of these motors just blowing up from axial loads. Now, would I personally design a printer with axial loads on the steppers? No, of course not. It's very simple to take them off it with just a pillow block. And I think I've empirically shown with my builds and prints that that works very well, as you can see in the design of my live stream printer and the test bed printer. And maybe that success is partially due to taking that load off the stepper. That's just speculation though. But again, who or what clips? This worked for me in this situation, and I would definitely redesign them for a different type of printer. Or again, if money were no object. And I think with the pillow block, you can kill two birds with one stone as well, deal with some of the issues of alignment and Z-wobble, so why not just do it if you have the choice to design from scratch? So on that side of the fence, I would say, yeah, go ahead and do it right. Take the load off the stepper. But on the other side of the fence, to play devil's advocate, these are very popular among a lot of very expensive printers, as in this one from the nice Dutch fellows that produce it, fellas and gals. And they have a maximum axial load rating of 10 newtons. Now, as we know, 10 newtons equals 1 kilogram. And we also know three things. One, the bed on these weighs way more than 1 kilogram. Two, there are no reports of these failing prematurely, at least not that I have seen. And three, for 10 grand, they sure as heck could afford to do it differently if it were a problem. So, while I would not do it, they do it, charge $10,000, and nobody's complained so far. So, there you go, both sides of the fence. Draw your own conclusions. The point is, the proof is in the pudding. Does it work in your situation for your particular set of parameters? Where would the world be if somebody was like, oh, Jimi Hendrix, I'm sorry you're left-handed and don't have a whole lot of money to buy a left-handed guitar, but stringing up a right-handed guitar upside down is just wrong. You're gonna have to learn to play the flute instead. Now, there was some kind of misunderstanding with that ball bearing trick video where people were thinking that I was recommending that, like as a general rule across the board for all printers or something. But I literally said in the same video and every past video that the way I do it is to use a bearing block with some combination of a radial bearing, a thrust bearing, and then depending on what type of kinematic mechanism, we're not just talking about printers here, mostly printers are lightweight, but any kind of linear actuator, you will have to pick the one that's right for the situation. And that's why I went through the entire steps of end constrained with tension, constraint on one side, float, fix, float. But a lot of people want to know, like, what's best and blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, the answer is it depends. The answer is always it depends. If you just say what's best in a vacuum, that's like saying, do you prefer the taste of purple or orange? It's a non sequitur. It doesn't make any sense. There's no context. And again, that's the point of this channel, to explore various contexts and to take things that are janky and make them less janky as cheaply as possible. And another thing that I learned from those forums is if you come in with an opinion, have empirical data and testing to back it up. All right, hopefully that clears up confusion once and for all. Again, maybe I'll do a loads on steppers thing and do some testing just to kind of put a final nail in the coffin and see what's going on. So now, on to the questions. Oh, I did not see this question. This is 6 days ago. I'm really sorry I didn't get to all of these. Plus, I've complained about the interface of this question thing before. I don't get notifications always when somebody replies to a comment underneath one of my comments, and sometimes I have to expand it to see more comments and then expand the threads to even see the replies to the comments. So a lot of times, like, somebody asks a question and I reply, and then they ask another question, like, I just don't see it. So I literally have to scroll down, and like I showed you in that video, like, just between, when did I answer these questions? Like midnight last night or 10 o'clock last night, something like that. Between then and like noon today, I had another 57 new questions in addition to like all the follow-up questions that I didn't get notifications for, plus the questions that all got caught in the spam filter and I had to go and reply because people put, like, you know, links under it and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm sorry I don't always get to all of these. I wish they'd fix that. Where'd it go? Rob Scanlon says, why not just delete the ball bearing and run the screw on the motor shaft? Full disclosure, I've been running my screw on the motor shaft for over 2 years, and the same benefit as far as I could tell, no issues. I'm not positive what he means. Oh, I know what he means. So, I guess he means resting, or I guess you, if you're watching, Rob, means resting the lead screw down on the motor shaft so that it flexes a little bit. Yeah, that could be fine too. The reason for the ball bearing is that you don't have a rocking motion. Let me see if I can. Yeah, so let's say this is your motor shaft, and then this is your threaded rod. So like as you flex, you have this rocking motion here. No big deal, but it's an eccentric kind of motion as opposed to, like, you know, flexing around the ball bearing. But if you say you've been doing it with no problems, then obviously in some cases that can work. So if you're going to try as like a last ditch effort the flexible coupling ball bearing thing, try just dropping the shaft down against the other shaft. That sounds dirty. And see if that works out for you while you're waiting for your ball bearing to be delivered in the mail. And if it's fine, screw the ball bearing. Let me see what else. Oh man, here's an entire freaking thread that I missed. 6 days ago, Eggy the Tech. Hey, sorry, Edgy, whatever your name is, that I missed this thread. It seems like a lot of people are interested. Any tips on prepping LM8UU for install? I might need to replace mine, and I might lube them correctly. Oh well, it looks like a lot of people replied. Let me see if the replies were reasonable. Clean detergent. Yeah, it looks like Laurel and Spock have made some recommendations. Anything else? Oh geez, lots of questions I missed. Fasten Google says, but linear rail does not need support. Let me see where this video goes. La 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 la. This is okay. It's linking to one of Joe Telling's videos where there's a guy who has unsupported linear rail. Let me yeah, so here's a linear rail thingy. So the printer that he linked to, that's unsupported linear rail, so that's not mounting this to the back. You're supposed to completely support this if you want it to meet specifications. This goes back to that talk, like, that I said earlier, like, can I fit a full-size refrigerator in the back of my truck? Sure. Is that optimal? No. Is it fine under certain conditions? Yeah, sure. So, yeah, that is actually something that I tried and maybe working with in the future is unsupported linear, or not unsupported. The arrangement that he has in that printer would be called end supported. So it would be using using fully supported linear guideway as end supported linear guideway. But again, if you're using this as a 3D printer, if your gantry is not that big, if your acceleration and jerk aren't that crazy, if your print head isn't that heavy, then you can get away with a lot of crazy stuff. And there are numbers for this in the data sheets. So just check the data sheets, know what your moment of inertia is, and you can figure out if it'll work for you or not. From my tests with this cheap linear rail, the first thing I tried for the bang for the buck 3D printer build was, hey, what do I do if I just take this rail, bolt one actuator directly to another actuator for the gantry, and then just skip the support altogether? Is that cool? And my findings for the cheap rail like this and the 250 millimeter gantry that was on that, plus the direct drive extruder in a cantilevered format, was that there's way too much deflection with this rail to use it that way. But maybe end supported, it's better. Again, the answer is frustratingly, as always, it depends. And at $1.36, I thought I could probably spring for the extra support. So yeah, thanks, Fastenkugel? I hope that's not a swear word or something, for pointing that out. Cool Zombie. Oh, Cool Zombie linked to the MKS Mini 128 by 164 LCD, and this was under the Rearm Ramps 1.6 Plus hack video thing that I did. And he asked if that would have the same problems that the regular RepRap discount panel did. Those mini LCDs, you can trace that MKS didn't develop those. That was, I forget what the original name was, but it was some guys on the reprap.org forums like years back developed these tiny little mini panels, and I've actually built them. It uses what driver does that thing use? An ST595? Is that a thing? Anyway, it's a different display driver than ST7900 series or whatever that they use on the RepRap discount ones. So it doesn't inherit all of those problems. I don't know if those are supported in Marlin 2 yet. They are supported in Marlin 1, but anything that has SPI conflicts will have SPI conflicts. However, those use a different driver from the U8G library. So again, I don't know if they ported that driver over to Marlin 2 yet, but it may not have the same timing issues. I would have to test it, sorry. Another old comment. NL Kumar says, Trinamic has yet another controller coming out called the TMC 5161, which seems to be far more superior to the TMC 5160. It's got integrated MOSFETs and better pin, less package, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, they have that listed on their website. The 5161 seems to have a lot of the features of the TMC 5160s, but it uses an internal MOSFET H-bridge. Probably means it doesn't handle as much current, but might be a simpler board and things like that. I will have some videos coming out about the 5160s, as I mentioned before in the little video clip. Like the current the current testing that I'm doing is being a pain in the butt, so I might have to isolate these instead of doing them together. Sorry, but it's right about here that my voice started to give out, so I had to cut this, and I guess I'll do some more Q&A videos in a little bit, but I gotta cut this short right here. I guess I've talked long enough as it is, but regardless, stay tuned if you want just like a fun, wacky project. That'll be coming up fairly soon. I'll get back to the regular stuff as soon as possible, and thanks for checking it out. Again, my support links are in the video description below, and until the next video, get out there and make something awesome.